last week, I had David Lee Roth on my podcast. I guess I posted it about a month ago. That was actually a recording I did for my Ozzys Boneyard show on Sirius XM. I do a weekly radio show on there, and I interviewed Dave, and he co-hosted the show with me, and I posted it as a podcast. And on there, he said that Van Halen's actually been in the studio working on new music. He went up there a couple days ago and jammed with the guys, and they're always working on new music, and figure, 18 months they'll pretty much be starting to work on a new record and touring. That aired actually Labor Day weekend, that interview with David Lee Roth on Sirius XM. Then I posted a podcast like a month or two afterwards. Somehow, some way, last week, that story at a podcast caught wind, and it was like national news that David Lee Roth says Van Halen is working on a new record, and about 18 months you'll see some new stuff and a tour. I don't know why it took that long. Some news outlet picked it up and ran with the story. It was actually trending at #1 on Yahoo last week. David Lee Roth and Van Halen, the interview I did with them in the podcast. So it was pretty cool. It's just weird that it took like 3-4 months to actually have that catch on. But yes, trending on Yahoo, and it really helped the podcast a lot because people didn't know I had the podcast. We're checking it out all over the place. So that's what we're going to do this week. My part 2 interview with David Lee Roth. Now, the day that I interviewed Dave for my Ozzys Boneyard show, I was on earlier in that morning on the Opie Anthony show with David Lee Roth. It was me, Jim Norton, and David Lee Roth. Opie and Anthony were out that day on vacation or sick, I'm not sure. So we hosted the show, and Dave came in, and it sat in for like 3 hours. So most of this interview is going to be from Opie and Anthony, clips from there, and also some of the stuff that I did with them in the studio outside that I didn't air on Ozzys Boneyard. I forget which is which, but you'll hear Jim Norton's voice, also Sam from the Opie and Anthony show. You'll hear his voice in there in a couple clips too, but it's a mixture of both, from O&A and also from my interview with him separately that it didn't air on Ozzys Boneyard. So here's some clips. I'll introduce each clips along the way, but it's a really funny interview and really insightful and all the shit about David Lee Roth. So this is part 2 of the David Lee Roth interview on Comedy Metal Midgets. Oh, shit, we always end the podcast with a song. I didn't even prepare right now. What the hell am I going to do? Shit. All right, let's go old school. Let's go, this band Riot, there's a band called Riot, early 80s. They're from New York, I think Long Island or Brooklyn. And they put an album out called Fire Down Under. If you watch that metal show, which is coming back, that metal show, January 18th. We talk about them all the time. They put like 3 or 4 great records out. So we'll play a song off of Fire Down Under, a band called Riot. I think it was released in 81 or 82. And this song's called, this is like the hit off the record, called Swords and Tequila. So we'll end the podcast with that. But let's get back to the Roth stuff. My first clip I'm going to introduce right here is Dave talking about threesomes, how to pull them off, the right moves, the wrong moves, and just some really funny stories about threesomes. So check this out. Dave, in a threesome, though, there's a lot of you got to give attention to everybody because someone doesn't want to feel left out, one of the girls.
Which is inevitable.
So how do you work that? How do you placate them where they can both have a good time and not worry that you're spending too much time with one and all that other stuff?
Well, they got to know each other in advance. If you really want to know the truth, the mechanics of this, they got to know each other in advance, and it has to be their idea. Because if you're going to be the mechanic, if you're going to be the master cylinder, and you're going to bolt that shit together, it's usually glued together with Jack Daniels and a lot of bullshit promises that you can't keep because it's 4 a.m. But so it's got to be their idea.
So it was better, like after a show, you wouldn't just pick 2 random ones, 2 girls that were hanging out backstage that didn't know each other. That usually ended in a disaster.
Yeah.
2 friends worked way better.
Oh, absolutely.
And do you have to witch doctor it into their head? So, like, it's your idea, but they think it's their idea?
No. They'll know in advance. They've already figured it out. They got the logistics, you know, and that is a standard, okay? If you think you're going to put it together, okay, you talk about mechanicking and like, okay, what's one of the tricks? Oh, I know. You leave some of the Penthouse magazines laying around. And
I did that one.
And guys, all of us think we invented that shit. And she picks it up and goes, oh, do you like this stuff? And you act surprised and go, why? Do you? Like you're the first one to invent that nonsense.
Did it work for you?
We used to leave the Playboy channel on and hide the remote and take the knob off the TV before we went to the club. So we got girls back that was on the TV, and we're like, I don't know where the remote is. Do you know? I don't know. And then you don't even have the pliers to turn the channel. Oh, I guess we got to watch this.
Exactly.
You take the knobs off the TV.
Yeah, we took the knob off so they couldn't even just do it manually. We're like, I don't even know where the knob went.
That's so funny. No, it's got to be their idea because you're going to be fascinated with one gal more than the other. You know, you have a choice of whatever, so you're always going to favor one. I do remember once. These two gals approached me in Vancouver. I guess after a certain point of time, all is forgiven, right?
Right.
I can get away with pretty much, you know, whatever. Yeah. And these two gals approached me, dancers, Italian girls. Those weren't Italian dances, but I'm sure those dances would be popular if they did them in Italy. And it was at a strip club called the Cecil Hotel in Vancouver. And they approached me at about 2 in the morning and said, hey, we're upstairs in a room upstairs. And they both had huge wads of dollar bills, like, you know, 6 inches stacks of it. Great looking gals, you know. And it was stuffed in their G-strings. I'm going to cut to the crash because I'm not sure who's really listening to this show at this point in time. But when I woke up, the G-strings had burst and there were dollar bills everywhere. And it was like somebody had tarred and papered us because it was in the middle of the summer, like July or August, really hot and sweaty. And the dollar bills were like glued all over us. And I remember thinking to myself, I am made of money. If but for a moment.
Do you ever
like your comedy? There's no punchline.
No. I didn't know if there was more. But now, when you have two and the two girls leave, do you ask for both numbers? How do you do that? Just out of courtesy, even though you're not going to call them?
Oh, I can make taxi fare in 17 languages. Are you kidding? like Uncle Manny said, hey, kid, the secret to show business is sincerity. When you can fake that, you're in. Yeah. Golly, look at the time. No, I'm hesitant to even say the word groupies because I always got along great with the gals that I was chasing out on the road. And the girls that we were chasing in a groupie frame of mind did not look anything like groupies that you're thinking of. Usually when you say groupies, you're thinking of a variation of Motley Crue meets CC DeVille from Poison times teased hair with vampire goth makeup, and there is a place for that kind of a girl.
Right.
But Wednesdays.
Not weekends.
Not weekends. No. And we were chasing the prom queen. We were chasing the homecoming girl. We were chasing the gymnast.
The wholesome.
Oh yeah, you know, we would go checking out the line. I would take my bicycle, not motorbike, but bicycle out of the back of the tour bus and go cruise the lines of everybody who was waiting to get into animal seating shows when there were no chairs. You know, so there'd be huge long lines, 6 blocks long. You know, and we would just cruise up and down there. And I still keep up with a number of those gals too.
Now would they be crazy
seeing
you?
Husband.
Would the whole fucking line be going crazy seeing you ride the bike?
No, true revolutionary moves invisible and invulnerable amongst the people. You know, as you can see, I can either dress up, you follow, and attract the attention, or you dress the same color as the buildings. You just kind of fit right in with the surroundings and whatnot. And you get the best of both worlds. That way you go around completely unnoticed until it's time to get a decent table at the restaurant.
So basically, you did a dry run.
Oh, yeah. And you would, Jesus, what else did we do? This was when video was you took 4 guys just to carry the equipment. Today, you need just a cell phone or whatever. We used to have to lug that fucking camera with all the cords. There was a special box for the cords and then the recording unit, you follow. And then we had a trunk full of costumes, you know, like a wedding dress. You want me to keep going?
Yeah, of course. So you would dress them up? You had costumes for them?
Sure, a state trooper outfit. You know? Yeah, we were full production. Yeah, it's Van Halen, man. 6 times the size, 20 times as fast. You know, some people burn their candle at both ends, and in this band, we took a blowtorch to our candle. 22 times the light and 1/3 the time.
Yeah.
Here's my new Junior Miss flamethrower. Hey, where's the candle? You're breathing it.
All right, this next clip with David Lee Roth, we talk about groupies. And we join in the middle of conversation here. Dave talking about groupies, how to get rid of them, which ones he likes and which ones he doesn't.
Meet a girl and you liked her so much you'd keep her on the bus, you know, to the next city.
Oh, certainly a thing of beauty. Yeah, not last forever, but at least a 3-day weekend.
Then how do you tell her it's time to go? How do you get rid of her?
Yeah, you met her in Boston and now you guys are in Louisiana. Now how do you tell her, look, you got to go back to Boston?
Oh, well, you use security for that. You know, again, it was a crazier, wilder time. We would rent extra hotel rooms just for the 4th encore, we would call it. You follow? And just before you go into, for your extra encore in one of the hotel rooms, you tell one of the security guys, give me a call in 20 minutes. In 20 minutes, the phone rings, and you act all upset, and you go, no way, shit, I gotta go. You know, and make it down the hallway, probably to another room.
What if you didn't finish in 20 minutes?
Oh, you were finished. That was never an issue. You know, speed trials were never a big hurdle with this band.
So you'd have another room just to get out of there, like that you can go sleep. Like, would you keep your stuff in the fucking in the dummy room, kind of, or in the other room?
My personal best was I had my room, I had one of the security guys' room, and one of the encore rooms, all going in one night.
And you'd go from one to one to one.
Yes, I was in room 1, then I went to room 2, then I went to room 3, and then back to room 1.
And that's
no
impressive.
Drugs. No
yeah,
drugs.
I know, that's what I'm saying. That's impressive. That's pre-Viagra.
No drugs.
Cialis.
No, drug-free.
So he was almost like a baseball player in the 70s. He didn't take the PEDs or the steroids.
No, we didn't have any of that, or I would have.
Wow.
All right, this next clip is, I asked Dave, how did Van Halen, at the peak of their popularity, stay focused and motivated to put another great record out and do another great tour with all the distractions and them being huge stars? And then also it turns into us talking about songwriting and Dave talking about how his songwriting process goes out. So this is this clip right now.
Big band, when you guys are on top, everything, you know, parties at Studio 54, private planes, how do you come back from that huge tour, put another great album out, go do another huge tour, where you guys don't lose a little?
I think that's a good question. Is most artists, and I've been told this by folks who are part of the setup, the lighting crew, the carpenters, the staging, even the wardrobe folks, the gals who do all of this, and they say, just recently one of the gals said to me, Dave, you're one of the few artists I work with who actually enjoys all of the preparation and the setup and the in-between. Most of the people, she said, that I work with, and she works with all the big ones, you know, all the biggies with no last name, the Madonna, Beyonce, Dave.
All the hot chicks.
all the verbs, Sting, Cher, Usher. These are verbs. And she said, for the most part, most folks don't do anything until about 8 weeks before that tour. About 6 8 weeks before that album. About 6 8 weeks before you launch the play on Broadway or start shooting for the movie. You practice with your sword or your ray gun or your motorcycle, whatever it is you signed up to portray in the film. But that most of the folks who are doing those pursuits don't really enjoy it beyond that. It's very finite. And in Van Halen, I wouldn't be surprised if right now, this evening, the fellas get together and start jamming. They do at least 3 times a week, sometimes 4 and 5. Just because that's what we do. Good writers write.
Right.
You know, good singers sing, and the band gets together and works routinely. I routinely am working lyrics. It's a muscle that is perishable, like gun handling or cooking. If you don't do it, you lose it.
How do you, can me ask you a question? Because there's something about Sabbath that where they said Ozzy would get a beat and he would just kind of start singing like ridiculous lyrics over it just to get a singing tempo down. Will you come up with something and go, okay, this is what I want the song to be, or will they come up with a riff and go, hey, do you have anything for this, or does it work both ways?
It can work a number of different ways. If the music comes first, I'll work that out with whoever. I've written with a variety of folks, and then from that you'll either try something rhythmic to it, then you'll try to put the words to the rhythm you've created. Some like what could that be? I don't know. I pledge allegiance to the flag. Great. Do something like that. You came up with the rhythm first. Or you wrote those lyrics long before the music ever happened. And, you'll find the emotional content that's happening in a given piece of music. And then from that, hopefully you have a whole repertoire of, different songs and titles and subject matter and so forth. That, it's like when you take a racehorse into the blacksmith. He's going to take a look at your horse and go, okay, well, he's a little different over here. You know what? I know just the shoe, and then I'll bend it a little here, and I can kind of tweak it there. What distance is he running? What's the subject matter, so to speak, like that. And the way that you write lyrics can happen a number of different ways as well. We all love to believe that Jesus speaks through us. I am but the conduit. You've heard that horse shit.
Yeah.
I sit in the room and it just comes to me. Yeah, well, what's been coming to you is Moon in June rhymes with when's it going to happen? Soon? Nice, Bob. Down. Fuck. And I'm going to eat it with a knife? Oh, fuck. How much time do I have? A fork? It's June. Soon. I'm going to eat it with a spoon. Oh, that's excellent. And you write that down, and you wind up with that, over and over. Put your hands in the air like you just don't care. Is what happens when you just sit on the stool by yourself in the room and hope that the fates deal with you. The gods do not punish you with a lightning bolt, but with time. Time extended, time wasted, and of course my favorite, your time's up. Here's a better way to do it. Here's a much better way to do it. And again, there's no magic to this. None of this shit miracles itself into place. I have notebooks that I'll keep. Some of them I've had for over 20 years. And as I hear little parts and parcel of conversation, part and parcel, just write that down. Sounds like a song title. You follow? And maybe there's lyrics. I just saw a bumper sticker. It said, no talent, no skills, just heart. Hey, sounds like a pickup truck to me. Who's driving the pickup truck? There's your story. Okay. Now somebody, I saw it on a movie, a grade B cowboy movie or something, and the fella says to the school marm, well, I ain't that smart, man, but I sure can lift heavy things. There's one of your first lines in the song.
Yeah.
But you won't know all of that until you have a fat notebook full of, bits and pieces of what people say, things from the movies, bumper stickers, things from sports advertisements. And you can let them age, too. If you get something out of a sports advertisement, let it go for 10 years or whatever and bring it back. I think it was for Nike or Adidas. It says, when was the last time you did something for the first time? Whew, that sounds like some Buddhist shit to me.
Right.
It's a good way to kick off the weekend. Certainly a great way to sell shoes. 10 years later, nobody even cares where that came from, and you sampled it. This is a big year for sampling. Get with it.
Do you have any
modern, man?
Do you have any stuff?
Eminem does that a lot. He'll bring up stuff. He'll bring
sure.
Pee Wee Herman. Remember like 2 albums ago, he was bringing up like Pee Wee Herman stuff and stuff. Stuff that was from 15 years ago.
Oh, you can bring up expressions that people have used. Bang, zoom to the moon, like from the Honeymooners. Right. To the moon, Alice. That right there could well be a, well, not hip hop. I'd use that for electronica. For ghostwriting, for something like that. Bang, zoom, parentheses, to the moon remix. There you go. But you ain't going to be able to have that off the top of your head, especially under the pressure with all the neckties looking through the window, and the clock on the clubhouse wall goes 10,000. $10,500, $10,580.
Right.
Have that, and I've done, I'm going to say, more Van Halen songs than not in that. I also ghostwrite for other people and have for a number of years, and you can change the style, you can change the tone, the temperament. You're never going to have writer's block if you're doing that. If you're trying to think of an explanation for something, you just can't keep throwing yourself at it. Compile the ideas like you would for a debate.
Yeah, that makes sense. Now, if you come into the room as a lyricist and come in a room with personal lyrics, and the rest of the band looks at you like, Dave, can you come up with something better? Or this is kind of, these lyrics really don't fit this music. What happens there? Do you go, look,
it's pretty rare. It's pretty rare.
So they're pretty cool when you come in.
To it. Now, it's if you are lyrically, if you're dialed into the lyrics, a lot of people are. Bob Dylan fans will tell you probably number one on the list is the lyrics. Number two is the melody and whatever, In material like Van Halen, you don't have to speak English as a first language at all. It's probably even better. Like Stravinsky said, my music's best understood by animals and small children. Well, my music is best purchased by animals historically, because you don't have to speak English. You can't fool you with it. It's authentic in its confidence. It's authentic in its sense of humor. It's authentic in its sense of confrontation, and you can sense that. You're not fooled by the language or whatever. But there are very real stories there, and there's a lot of questions that are presented. I wrote a song on this last record about tattooing, and on the surface, it sounds like another girls' cars, let's party or whatever. But it asks a whole lot of questions like, why is the crazy shit we would never say become poetry in ink? And there's a whole lot that if you care about it, you can delve in. If not, you don't have to pay attention to the lyrics at all. Like I said, Van Halen music works perfectly. Even if you don't speak English at all, we are equally as reviled and celebrated internationally as we are in English-speaking neighborhoods. If you do something intentionally so bad that it'll turn out good.
Yeah.
I'll give you an example of Van Halen. We tried to write the worst punk rock song, single, no chorus, no verse, no nothing, just two stupid chords. Tried to play the stupidest solo possible, and that's how we wrote Ain't Talking About Love. Even the chorus is supposed to be punk rock. Everybody at the time is yelling, I'm in love with you. I'm going, I ain't talking about love. And I'm intentionally not singing, just shouting it. You follow me? And tried to make the worst possible song possible.
Wow.
We were getting drunk in the basement, and about halfway through the evening, I said, uh-oh. Uh-oh. And it turned out really, really, positive like that. So, I got to wonder, if there's stuff that's, so bad that it's good. Did you see Rock of Ages?
No.
Yes, I saw that.
Okay, weigh in here.
Okay,
the movie?
All
right, this next clip, I talked to Dave about how similar it was with Van Halen and Black Sabbath being apart for all these years, not putting new music out with, 3/4 of the original band, both bands, and then all of a sudden putting a record out, doing really well. People loved it. The fans loved both the Van Halen record, Different Kind of Truth, and Black Sabbath 13, and then going on a tour and seeing all the success, after all these years. Like, it's pretty similar to what Sabbath just went through. So we talk about that right here in this clip.
I mean, absolutely. I mean, you guys, it's the Sabbath and the Van Halen thing is pretty much parallel. You guys both being away for a long time, getting the guys back and putting an album out and doing a sellout tour and putting out a great product.
Well, yeah, it's, I think you don't miss the water till the well runs dry. All right. Like Ozzy never changed. He lives in his own little world. All right. So he never really left. I think perhaps some of the other fellas, just from word around the campfire, from what I can tell, you don't. It's not so much gentrify as you normalize. You get married, you have kids, you're going to the PTA meetings. Now you have vacations. If your wife works, she's got 2 weeks vacation. Where are we going? We're going to down the shore. We're going to the Club Med. We're going to Zig. And you start to normalize. You follow? It's a normal world. We're the ones who are abnormal. And there's always that push and pull, to join the clan. You follow? And when you do, a lot of times it turns out that your rage and your craziness was way more interesting than the real you.
Yep.
I think we touched on this before when last time I was here, and we were talking about some of the fellas who come out of rehab, and it's great that they're still alive, and it's great that, we've saved another human being, but Jesus Christ, man, you were way more interesting when you were all fucked up.
See, it's weird because for me, like I was single, I got married at 47, was my first marriage, and I had a kid at 47 too. So I was always like, I can't get any work done if I'm married and I got a kid and I have to go to PTA meetings and change diapers and watch them and stuff. But meanwhile, since I've gotten married, I've done 100 times more work in my career because I'm totally focused on that. I'm 100%, I've gotten so much more work done because I know those little moments I have, I got to focus that 2-hour window. Before I would just get up at 11 in the morning. I'm like, I got all day to do whatever. And I was only 50% productive.
You have to obsess. If you really want to compete, it's going to take a big chunk out of your normal real life, And we always act surprised. Jesus, the divorce rate amongst really good policemen is 80%. Whoa, what a surprise. Oh, the divorce rate against successful musicians is 90%. Whoa, what a surprise. Successful politicians. And the list is long. The only thing I don't accept anymore is the surprise. How can you be fucking surprised anymore? It's like when we see these baseball players taking drugs and doing steroids. Stop. The only thing I will not accept is your surprise.
Yeah.
Everybody half the people in these hallways here are taking prescription meds.
All of them.
Half the people downstairs actually own those prescriptions.
Right.
So,
all right, in this last clip, I talked to Dave about where he ranks Mick Jagger as a frontman in the history of frontmen, of rock frontmen, basically. And then also it somehow gets turned into talking about wrestling and David Lee Roth's outfits, where he got them from professional wrestling. It's pretty funny at the end. He's talking about the goofy outfits that wrestlers wore, and he basically just stole their ideas and everything. So Mick Jagger, where does he put him in the ranking? Top frontman of all time, and then it turns into pro wrestling, only with David Lee Roth.
You put him as a frontman all time.
That's
in rock and roll.
Well, that's interesting because in rock and roll, there was a whole lot of great new audience members who had never seen where he got it from. You follow? If you watch the, the Teenage America something show from the early 60s, I think it's 1965, James Brown comes on right before the Rolling Stones, and he does Night Train, and you can tell that he is competing. All right. This is when James had the famous giant conch haircut. It was called a conch. And it took almost 3 hours to get his hair to do that. That haircut was so cool. It had its own fucking area code. Okay. Right. And, everybody imitated James Brown, doing the mashed potatoes and, I think it was called the Hully Gully, et cetera, that where you kind of move your feet, et cetera. And he was competing with the Rolling Stones. You could tell right away. And he burnt that stage down, burned it down. Mick then comes out with the Stones, and it's a pale white boy version. It's just written all over the screen. Now, admittedly, he did get a whole lot better at that. But just as if you watch Michael Jackson, and if you know the influences where it came from, arguably the influences were a little bit stronger doing what they were doing. Watch some of what Michael was doing on that stage. He's imitating some of the Flash teams like the Nicholas brothers or the Berry brothers. You can Google these. You see these on YouTube. These guys come out of the 40s and the 50s, and you'll see the moonwalk. You'll see, the double back spin, etc. But it was done a little bit better. You follow? And this is what I see when I see the Stones. Is I knew that giant totem pole when it was just a tree stump.
Right.
And I'll always think that to a degree. Just as when people will watch Van Halen, there's a lot of folks who think I'm completely original, and then there are those of you who know that no, I stole most of my moves from James Brown.
James Brown.
Singing wise is probably closer to who sang Mustang Sally, who sang Soul Growlers, closer to Otis Redding, and Sam and Dave, acts like this. So if you knew the stone before it was made into the statue first, you'll never quite get that out of your mind.
You were the first one to jump off the drum riser, though, and do a split. I never saw that before.
Okay, well, that's not called jumping off the drum riser and doing a split. That's called a 460 moonsault off the top rope.
I forgot it was your wrestling move. Right?
And now that I dial in the color, you go, wait a minute. It was the snooker fly drop. Wait a minute. That was the sunsplash move. Wait a minute. No, nothing new under the wrestling sun.
And that was always great with Dave because there was always a story, and you never, like you were saying before, like you never denied it or said it was truth. One, I think you were in a cast on the back of Van Halen 2, and they said it was from the picture you took on the album cover from jumping off the drum riser.
Yes, that's true. That is
true. And there was another one where you broke your wrist, and there was a story that you got in a fight with a guy in a bar over rock versus disco. And because he liked disco and you were a rocker.
Shit, I don't remember exactly that. But I remember jumping off that drum riser. Those are wrestling moves. You know what? And I was just on the radio. I was just doing a podcast with Stone Cold Steve Austin, the wrestler. It was the other night, and I was talking to him. And he says, man, Dave, he says, I always wanted to be a rock and roller. He says, most of these wrestlers wanted to be rock and rollers, be in a band of some kind. I says, that's not even a real coincidence because most rock and rollers see themselves as fierce warriors at some point in our brief but colorful tenure. Either we're wrestlers or boxers or, I personally am Spider-Man. It's, delicate house blend. And I started appropriating from that early on. When I saw Muhammad Ali appropriating some of the persona, I figured I can appropriate some of those moves. Right now, imitate Spider-Man in your imagination. You crouch down and you get your fingers all apart, right? Like you're going to get them with the palms of your hands, right? And kind of make your eyes disappear. Well, there's your new album cover shot. You follow? Right. And then there's the Joker. Anytime I'm doing anything, with the mic stand or a cane that looks remotely like a cane, like the top piece of the mic stand or whatever, there's a way to kind of cock the head. It's almost like you're going to tap dance, but you never really do. It gets kind of a menacing look to it. You never complete the move, which is unsettling. Right. You look like you got a thought.
No, I'm listening. I'm listening.
No, it's funny because there's I'm sure you know the band Steel Panther.
I know of them, sure.
The singer is, they basically, do 80s stuff or whatever, but the singer is totally, I think he was in a Van Halen tribute band back in the day, Atomic Punks. He was a singer, but the new generation of kids love this band. They play like 80s hard rock. And he's total David Lee Roth on stage. And he does every move, wears the same outfits, and people love it. Does the kicks, does everything, and it's just really cool to see. And just the new generation go, wow, that's real. I've never seen that before. If they didn't know if they didn't see Van Halen back in the day.
Well, this solicits a whole nother conversation here. Let's start off with Journey, the current arrangement of the band right. Journey. And we have our friend who is singing there. I think his name's Arnell.
Arnell, yeah.
And Arnell is making a living sounding exactly like somebody else. Okay? That being said, it begs the question of, are rock bands like a Broadway play, like West Side Story, where you can change the people over the years and the play remains every bit as good, if not better? Of course, when you go see the modern version of West Side Story on Broadway today, nobody is trying to sound exactly like the original cast. I can't even remember who was in the original cast. I don't even think I was alive for the original cast of that. You follow? But maybe rock bands are to some degree. Want to weigh in here? What do you think? What's your answer to this question?
I'm thinking of something. I just got a text from Chris Jericho talking about wrestlers, and he's just saying this interview is the best.
He was probably calling in.
What do you mean?
Okay, we don't have a phone screener.
Why don't we have a phone screener?
I don't know. There's been a phone screener all day, but he was on the hotline.
Okay, well, let's
was out doing runs, and then I asked other people to come, and nobody wants to come do the phones.
Who didn't want to come do the fucking job that we need done?
Well, wait, we'll just talk about wrestling instead of Arnel Pineda because it's a more interesting
Well, Chris has got a great
subject.
band. Chris got a great metal band called Fozzy.
Yeah.
Fozzy.
Yeah.
Is that a play on words?
Yeah, it's kind of like it was.
It was originally, but now
they're
it's a serious
actually
band, and they're really
good band.
Yeah.
Because I just saw this coffee company last night on television, Javalia Coffee Company. And I thought, it's a combination of the word vagina and genitalia, right? Vagilia or whatever. And if you just reverse it, Javalia. No? No. You want to know why wrestling's the most popular thing going? It's because it's the only sport that everybody understands. It's just like swearing is the only language that we all understand. We touched on this subject earlier.
Yeah.
You know,
contact sports, the rules are the same. There's a winner and a clearly defined loser is usually the guy laying on his back.
And you can even understand the stories wherever you are. You can figure out who the bad guy is, who the good guy is.
Now that I've explained some of my roots now into the rock and roll, think back to some of the clothes I used to wear. It's all wrestling stuff.
Yeah.
Right.
The knee pads, and you wear it just from the knee pads down. To me, it was Comanche Indian. I don't know. It's wrestling. Come on. With the pants with the side pieces, it was black on the sides with the little stripes, and it kind of looks like ski pads. It's nothing but classic wrestling. Half of the moves were nothing but classic wrestling. The only thing I didn't do was land on somebody, which occasionally would happen after the show.
Well, that's not true, Dave, because there was I never saw a wrestler wear assless chaps.
Well, actually, you've seen something close to it because I got that from Road Warrior. Road Warrior Part 2, okay? Remember the Ayatollah of rock and roll and the guys with the big mohawks, etc., all wore pants like that. And I sat through that movie twice in a rainy Monday night in Pasadena, California at the United Artists Theater when there were still movie theaters. And I watched that goddamn thing through twice and thought, why isn't anybody doing this? I get it. American Indian biker bondage thing. This is so clearly evident.
And it was like national news that David Lee Roth says Van Halen is working on a new record, and about 18 months you'll see some new stuff and a tour. I don't know why it took that long. Some news outlet picked it up and ran with the story. It was actually trending at #1 on Yahoo last week. David Lee Roth and Van Halen, the interview I did with them in the podcast. So it was pretty cool. It's just weird that it took like 3-4 months to actually have that catch on. But yes, trending on Yahoo, and it really helped the podcast a lot because people didn't know I had the podcast. We're checking it out all over the place. So that's what we're going to do this week. My Part 2 interview with David Lee Roth. Now, the day that I interviewed Dave for my Ozzys Boneyard show, I was on earlier in that morning on 2, and this song's called, this is like the hit off the record, called Swords and Tequila, so we'll end the podcast with that. But let's get back to the Roth stuff. My first clip I'm going to introduce right here is Dave talking about threesomes, how to pull them off, the right moves, the wrong moves, and just some really funny stories about threesomes, so check this out.
Dave, in a threesome, though, there's a lot of you got to give attention to everybody because someone doesn't want to feel left out, one of the girls.
Which is inevitable.
So how do you work that? How do you placate them where they can both have a good time and not worry that you're spending too much time with one and all that other stuff?
Well, they got to know each other in advance. If you really want to know the truth, the mechanics of this, they got to know each other in advance.
Part 2 of the David Lee Roth interview on comedy metal midgets. Oh, shit, we always end the podcast with a song. I didn't even prepare right now. What the hell am I going to do? Shit. All right, let's go old school. Let's go, this band Riot. There's a band called Riot, early 80s. They're from New York, I think Long Island or Brooklyn. And they put an album out called Fire Down Under. If you watch that metal show, which is coming back, that metal show January 18th. We talk about them all the time. They put like 3 or 4 great records out. So we'll play a song off of Fire Down Under, a band called Riot. I think it was released in 81 or 80. Last week, I had David Lee Roth on my podcast. I guess I posted it about a month ago. That was actually a recording I did for my Ozzys Boneyard show on Sirius XM. I do a weekly radio show on there, and I interviewed Dave, and he co-hosted the show with me, and I posted it as a podcast. And on there, he said that Van Halen's actually been in the studio working on new music. He went up there a couple days ago and jammed with the guys, and they're always working on new music, and figure, 18 months they'll pretty much be starting to work on a new record and touring. That aired actually Labor Day weekend, that interview with David Lee Roth on Sirius XM. Then I posted a podcast like a month or two afterwards. Somehow, some way, last week, that story at a podcast caught wind in the Opie Anthony show with David Lee Roth. It was me, Jim Norton, and David Lee Roth. Opie and Anthony were out that day on vacation or sick, I'm not sure. So we hosted the show, and Dave came in, and it sat in for like 3 hours. So most of this interview is going to be from Opie and Anthony, clips from there, and also some of the stuff that I did with them in the studio outside that I didn't air on Ozzys Boneyard. I forget which is which, but you'll hear Jim Norton's voice, also Sam from the Opie and Anthony show. You'll hear his voice in there in a couple clips too, but it's a mixture of both, from O&A and also from my interview with him separately that it didn't air on Ozzys Boneyard. So here's some clips. I'll introduce each clips along the way, but it's a really funny interview and really insightful and all this shit about David Lee Roth. So this is